A lot of photographers say it's not about the gear, but how you use it, which is true. However, after being in this industry for 5 years, I'm also going to add that gear does actually matter if you want to produce a higher quality content piece of work. Because at the end of the day, a setup that costs, say, 5 to 10 grand is most likely going to give you a higher quality photo than a setup that costs under 1,000. And in this video, I'm gonna talk through the gear I started with 5 years ago and the gear that I use now for all of my shoots. Now, when starting out as a product photographer, you most likely will have a small budget to work with. You may not be able to afford a high quality camera or a lens or flashy lights that are super bright. And that's okay, we all start somewhere and we build up our kit over time as we move along. I get asked a lot actually if certain gear is required to start out in product photography, and my answer is no. You've got to work with what you've got and what you can afford. The very first thing that you should ask yourself when buying new gear is, what is my budget? Because there are so many options out there that cater to every single type of budget. When I started my career, here's the gear that I was using. My camera was a Canon 70D, which I do actually regret buying because it's a crop frame camera and I definitely could have used a full frame. My lens was a Canon 50mm 2.8, I think, which was about $250. And for my lighting kit, I had that really crappy lighting kit that you can get from eBay for like 90 bucks. I definitely recommend staying away from those cheap lighting kits because I just think they're a total waste of money. These were some of my earlier photos. Simply put, they're not powerful enough lights. I always had really terrible trouble with my lighting because they're just never bright enough. So I eventually bought myself a Godox SL60W to help up the quality of my lighting. And at the time, I was super intimidated by strobe lighting and I didn't know how strobes operated. And the SL60W comes at a super affordable price and it actually did a really good job for me for about a year or so. It was pretty much all I could afford at the time. But before I bought my Godox SL60W, I was mostly shooting in the corner of my bedroom or at my desk using natural light. And because the windows of my apartment building are tinted blue, I always had this really yucky blue color cast on my photos that I never knew how to get rid of. And there was a specific client situation that actually prompted me to invest in my first studio light. I was doing a shoot for a skincare brand and the brand was small, didn't have much of a budget, and I was coming into my second year of product photography. And the client wanted me to do a shoot with fresh fruit with the products laying on top. So here's a visual reference for you. I shot all the photos in natural light as well. Now, this situation was kind of like you get what you pay for kind of thing, and I didn't have studio lighting. I wasn't using Photoshop at the time because I didn't know how to. And if you have a small budget, you can't really expect high quality results like this. So I did the photo shoot, I bought all the fresh ingredients, I spent the whole day on it only to receive quite a bit of negative feedback on the photos. She literally tore apart my images and I get this email on a Saturday night while I'm with my parents. So you can imagine how shitty my night turned out to be after receiving feedback like that. Like it was a really long email, just like dot points of bad feedback. When people give feedback to creators, it's so important to be nice and not be emotional and just overall not be mean about it. There's always a fix for something. Because if feedback is delivered in a negative way, it can actually really hurt a creator's ego and discourage them because our creativity comes from our emotions. I once had a client literally yell at me via email, with so much of the email being in capital letters. Made me cry and it was not necessary. Anyway, at the time, I didn't know the importance of getting a deposit before starting any project. And so she hadn't actually paid me anything. So I refused to reshoot and I let her go as a client because it just was not worth my sanity to keep going. But what this situation did encourage me to do was buy my first studio light because I knew that if I was gonna up the quality of my images and produce this kind of style, I really did need good lighting. And honestly, good lighting and of course knowing how to light a scene is so key to product photography. And it was at this point where I was noticing the kind of work that was trending in the digital landscape, which is basically the work that I still create today, that bright, crisp look. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna work on creating this specific style of photo so I can attract more beauty and skincare brands to my business. And that's what I did. I practiced and learned new skills, and eventually things started taking off a lot more. Something that I will say is that in this industry, at some point or another, you're going to need to learn from someone else. You will need to invest in your education if you want to up-level your work. Now, if you do want to learn how to do this style of photo, you want to enter this industry of brand photography, make sure you go and check out my free photography masterclass, where I share with you how to do a go-to style of photo that your clients will absolutely love. I walk you through my lighting setup, my camera settings, and where I get some of my props from. Now, even though being a product photographer can be tough sometimes, this is such a lucrative industry which has so much opportunity and it pays incredibly well. So I'll leave that link in the description box below. You can watch it at any time. Anyway, back to the gear. I also upgraded my camera to a Canon 6D Mark II a year or so after I started. This camera is an amazing model if you're starting out and you're wanting a camera that is reliable and produces a nice quality photo. I used this camera for about 3 years, and at the same time, I upgraded my lens to a Canon L series 24-70mm lens, which I still use today. This lens is so versatile, and I highly recommend having this in your kit, especially if you do a mixture of product in the studio and product with a model on location. It is very handy. And if you're looking to buy your first lens, I definitely suggest the 24-70mm. Now, because my style is very bright and white, I knew that I wanted to expand on my lighting kit and upgrade from the Godox SL60W. So we invested in 2 Godox FV150s. And we did this because they're a hybrid light, meaning that they have both a strobe and a continuous function. So these lights have served me so well for the past 2 years, and I've created some amazing content using these lights. They're also super affordable for the quality and function you receive, and we do still use them for our video content. So fast forward to this year, 2022, I needed to spend some money before tax time, and I got myself a pair of Godox AD600 lights. And these go for around $1,300 each. They're battery operated, which I personally love because I no longer need to worry about a cord, and I can just move them around the studio with complete ease. And they're super bright. This year I also upgraded some of my camera gear as well. So I picked up a Canon L series 100mm macro lens, which has been an amazing addition to my lens kit. I actually bought this because I was doing a really big jewelry photo shoot, and you 100% need a macro lens if you're doing jewelry photography. I honestly do go between my 100mm and 24-70mm often, and probably use them equally as much. I also upgraded my camera to a Canon R5. I was so nervous to spend the money because this camera for the body alone is about $5,500. It's not cheap, but I knew it would be an incredible investment, and I can say that this camera is worth every penny. It's also an amazing camera for video, which has been super helpful for me in filming my course content and YouTube. Now, if you're just starting out in product photography, my best tip is to firstly work out your budget. What can you realistically afford? I would then walk into a camera store and test drive some cameras. You may prefer Nikon over Canon, or you may prefer Sony. Experience how each camera feels in your hands and test out some lenses as well. Just remember though that everyone starts somewhere, and you don't need all the fancy equipment right at the beginning. It's so crucial to not rely on your gear and instead put a lot of effort into getting good at styling and learning Photoshop. then when you have the budget and you know you're ready to up level, invest in new gear. I hope you found this video helpful and has given you some insight into my own journey with buying and upgrading my gear. If you have any questions, please let me know.